stuff that shows you what it all looks like. So it's live now. So I'm going to move and stand in front of people because I really can't read that far. Okay, so this is a screenshot of what it looks like when you go to the HR website. It says Core Competency Framework. So this just begins to show you kind of the front page of it. It tells you when we use them, when we don't use them. This is important here. They're not used to evaluate or grade positions or to figure out pay. So this is not part of the reclassification process. The reclassification process is its own thing. And then here you see we have the 4 that are required for each position there. So my screen grabs aren't that great. But here you have the 4 that are required for each position, the 2 that are required for managers, and then there are the rest of the competencies that are interchangeable depending on the position. So for instance, almost all the public-facing positions at KCLS have dealing with ambiguity, but not every position at KCLS has dealing with ambiguity. It's just going to matter. It'll depend on if it matters for that particular position. The HR staff has decision quality, but not everybody is going to have decision quality. So it's structured that you can easily get to the 4 that are required for everyone, the 2 that are required for the supervisors and managers, and these are just going to depend on your role, whether they're required or not. So this is what it looks like. So if you were to go in and click on Customer Focus over there, it's going to bring you to this page. And so I circled a couple things to show you that it's leveled, but it's not ranked, if that makes sense. So even at a level 1 in customer service, you're delivering on service, you're doing a good job. But if you want to get to 2, 3, and 4, you might take training, you might have a conversation with your supervisor. And so what we did was we listed what it looks like to be at the highest end of the level, and what it looks like to be at level 1. So you yourself can take a look at this and say, I'm ranked at level 1, or my supervisor thinks I'm at level 1. I really want to get here. So what can I do to get here? And we've helped you to tell you what that looks like. Here at the bottom, and I wonder if I can, I can't. Hopefully one of the other screenshots will show this better. So down here, what I circled, this is called negative indicators. So for customer focus, for instance, what you can do is take a look at this and figure out where you are, and we show you what success doesn't look like. So a negative indicator, so here at the bottom, there's going to be for every competency negative indicators. And so what we did in HR is we looked at all the negative indicators and had really vulnerable conversations around, am I doing any of these? And what can I do to learn and grow if I am doing these things? So for instance, one of the negative indicators for customer focus is you don't treat patrons equitably. So you can go in and look at each of the competencies, figure out where you would put yourself on the scale, have a conversation with your supervisor where they would put you, and then look at those negative indicators to say, am I doing any of those things, and then how can I challenge myself to stop doing those things? Yeah?
How do you score that if level 1 is the lowest and it's still competent? Like, how do you...
So if you're having a performance conversation with an employee and they have so many negative indicators you wouldn't even put them on level 1, that's probably a conversation you need to have with them. The expectation is at level 1, people are doing the work that we ask of them at KCLS. If employees are not even at level 1, that's probably a conversation that's a different conversation than your annual conversation. That should be a performance conversation with HR, honestly. Yeah.
So you're talking about talking to your supervisor about it, but what about your direct reports talking to you about your competencies? Meaning, are the direct reports having the opportunity to give feedback up to their supervisor based on how they view how their supervisor is performing in their core competencies?
So that was one of the recommendations from the staffing model evaluation, is that we engage in reverse appraisals throughout the organization. So with Norma in the room here, I will tell you that something like a reverse appraisal would have to be bargained with our unions. And we I mean, we're taking it under advisement. I mean, from my perspective, you should always be open to a conversation. Whether that looks like a reverse appraisal in the way it's meant in kind of organizational development arena is different. I would encourage the conversation. Part of valuing diversity as a competency is being willing to talk about differences. So, I mean, if you are meeting kind of your own professional growth in valuing diversity, it might mean a conversation around valuing difference and what your staff thinks of your ability to engage in these competencies. I would imagine as this comes out and staff start looking at it, the managerial courage and the coaching and counseling is something that staff are going to talk to their supervisors and managers about. Like, hey, this is something that's expected of you, and I want to hold you to your, to the expectations that the organization says they have for you. I mean, I'm pretty straightforward. It's going to happen. So, yeah. Okay, so same process with valuing diversity runs through the different levels, and even again at level 1, you're inclusive, you have respectful behavior in the performance of your duties. But then it kind of advances, whether you're seeking opportunities to deal with new differences, you're adaptable, you're nimble, and then here you get to you're strategizing and habitually doing different things in your daily work to enhance and value diversity. So again, it's on a spectrum, but even at 1, you're successful. If you have an employee who cannot even meet what is here at 1, you want to have a different conversation with them before the annual conversation about whether or not you can get them to level 1. Because you don't want the annual conversation, and we'll get to the timing of this, to be the first time this employee sees something that says you're not even on a scale. The annual conversation should not be that conversation. You should be having that conversation well before you sit down and have this one-time performance discussion if you have staff that are not on the scale at all. And again, here, there's a place for negative indicators. Let's see if my printout is a little more helpful.
Cynthia, I've been doing conversations the last couple months using the old form, but going over how it's going to change and what they should expect with the competencies and trying to integrate those as best I can in the current form. But I've been telling them, like 1 is not like you're awful, you're failing. And also I've told them that if you are doing awful in any of these categories, you're going to have heard from me before this. I'm not going to spring it on you once a year.
Yeah, that's one of the big takeaways from this training is do not spring it on your employees at the time that this conversation is happening. Look ahead of time. So these forms aren't going to go into effect till July 1. So I wanted to do this training with a lot of opportunity for supervisors and managers and staff to get familiar and comfortable, potentially sign up for training before this goes into effect. So please look at them and then think about your direct reports and consider whether the first time you use this is the time that you're going to tell them that they're having problems meeting the competencies. If that's the case, start early, contact HR will help you. Either get the employee training or help them with some expectation setting. Here, the valuing diversity, I'm trying to read what I have here, but engages in stereotypes when they talk about patrons and their coworkers. That's the stuff that's in the negative indicator. Unreceptive to coaching. So ethics, value, and judgment. Again, same thing. I think here actually you can see it a little better. This is criticizes organization without cause to colleagues, patron, and outsiders. Is secretive or evasive about mistakes. I can't read the rest, but it's all here. It shows you what it looks like. And again, even at level 1, you know our mission and vision and values. You're living them. There's ways to live them differently as you move through the different levels. And then finally, professional technical knowledge. This is the job skills, the meat and potatoes of everybody's role here. Coaching and counseling. same thing. And then managerial coach. And then
I had a question.
Yeah.
So the one about tracks progress, it seems like the manager's not even doing their annual conversation. It would be at that level.
I would say at that point, there should be a conversation about whether the supervisor is meeting the coaching and counseling competency.
Yeah, that's what I'm, yeah, on that level.
But again, you have time now to get familiar with it before this goes into effect, before you have your conversation with the regional manager about this work. And if you have, for instance, failed for 3 years to do coaching or to do your annual conversation, no judgment, might be the time to go do that before this goes into effect. Any questions here before I move on to kind of a slightly different?
I have a question. So my annual conversations are all taken care of from 2018. Should I wait till July to start the 2019 ones, or do the January, February, March through July already? Or
You go ahead and do what you've been doing.
Okay.
I wouldn't wait. Because if you're on a schedule with your staff and they're waiting and expecting to have that conversation, I wouldn't wait for it. I would just use the new form when it becomes naturally obvious to use it. So I wouldn't hold back any that you had already scheduled. All right, questions about these before I move on? Why did I put this on here? Oh, okay. So where this is highlighted, it says competency development. So when you go to the webpage, you are able now to click on this. And what that is going to bring you to is, my screenshots are terrible. This is an Excel spreadsheet that shows the 6 main core competencies and all the training that KCLS already delivers to employees. Around the 6 main competencies. So here it'll take you to all the trainings in the training department, and employees can self-identify the ones that they want to take and sign up for to help them in a particular competency. So right now the connection doesn't work. The goal is that this button here, and we're trying to fix it in the next few weeks, will take you immediately to the training catalog. But right now we've had to create a temporary solution, which is it'll take you to the spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet will show you all of the trainings in the training department that align to the competencies. So between now and July, staff can take a look and self-assess to see where they might want to get additional training. So this is the directory. And so I put this screenshot on here to show you that everything is visible and transparent. So if you, say, want to become an HR generalist, you can go, and these are linked. You'll click on this, it'll populate all the core competencies for each of those positions, and this runs for every position at KCLS. So here are all the foundation ones. It just happens in the order it's alphabetized. So staff can take a look before they apply to positions and find out what the core competency is needed for that position. This is what the new annual conversation looks like. So this is the front page of it. The front page has the competency, the definition, and then the levels with an area for comments. And I think this is a library services manager one.
When scoring someone, the 1 through 4, should we stick to a discrete 1, or can we say it's like between a 1 and a 2?
I think you can.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you want to make it as authentic as possible. So I'm not going to look at these and say you didn't mark a button. I'm going to look at it and say, did you do it and have a meaningful conversation with the employee? And if it's 1.5, that's fine. I think that actually helps employees understand where they are and what they can grow into. This second page of the form looks like this. So here's a new section. So this is obviously new. This is new as well. I just added this in the last few weeks. So this section here talks about organization-wide initiatives. And this comes from all of the recommendations from the strategic work teams. I don't know what I'm going to call it. You all know what I'm talking about?
Strategic project team.
The strategic project team. Okay, so at least 5 of the strategic project teams had recommendations about the annual conversation. And so what I did was take those recommendations and integrate them into the new annual conversation form. So for instance, the intellectual freedom group said that intellectual freedom topics and projects should be included in the annual conversations. So recognizing though that not everyone is going to be able to meet that expectation. So Greg, I'm looking at you. I don't know that your drivers are going to be able to identify a project that they worked on in any given year for intellectual freedom. I've put if applicable. But again, this at least generates a conversation with staff around intellectual freedom. So staff and supervisors are looking at this to say, okay, maybe the answer is none, but if you're in a position where intellectual freedom is a important part of your job, you might for 2020 think about a way to get an employee interested, engaged in intellectual freedom work. Terry, did you have a question?
Oh, no.
No, okay.
Just stretching.
Just stretching. Similarly, innovation and continuous improvement, that strategic project team asked for a place on the annual conversation forum to talk about innovation and staff innovation. So if staff have brought an innovative idea or an idea to continuously improve or be more efficient, you want to document it here so that we can understand what staff are doing in this area and then promote and advance continuous improvement and innovation. The diversity, equity, inclusion team talked about ensuring that every time you have an annual conversation that staff can document how they've promoted and lived into the DEI values of the organization. So that's on here. And then the knowledge team asked for every year that staff be able to articulate knowledge, skills, and abilities that they've developed over the course of the year or where they might have additional needs, particularly around training needs. So those have all been incorporated in the last few weeks. Yeah, Michelle.
So maybe the staff kind of live intellectual freedom. They really support it, but they're not taking any training. They're not doing a program. They're living it. They make a point of working with people and book displays, but no major project. So how they're really doing well. They're at a higher level, but that it isn't a program
Right. So here,
or training.
because it's off the page here, but part of this competency is defending intellectual freedom and patron confidentiality. Maybe for that employee, you rank them as a super high performer, scaled at a level 4, but you don't fill this out, or you do fill it out, but you say, this employee is so engaged in the day-to-day work of intellectual freedom. I'm going to list it here, but it might not be project work.
Yeah.
But for instance, somebody in HR, this might rarely be filled out, but I might have an HR generalist who actually really wants to engage in this work, and it's my job as a supervisor to find some way to get them engaged when they wouldn't normally engage in IF work. Whether that's partnering with ELSA on a project or whatever that might look like. And then again, the knowledge, skills, and abilities here to document any new knowledge that's acquired in the evaluation period, or any new knowledge that employees want to acquire.
So, is there protocol employees like just self-evaluate?
So, I guess I would ask a question because I think it's really different depending on the region and the department. How do you do it now?
What was the question?
Well, employees self-evaluate. So how I use this form is I have, so Danielle, Christine, and Nuu would fill in their comments and their rating, and then I would fill in a different color below them. That's one way to do it. I think it's probably the most organic way to do it because you can take a look at what employees wrote for themselves and respond to it. And then actually in one case we had another response, so it was kind of a document that continued to live and breathe as we talked about it. So yeah, I would have an employee take a stab at it first before you do it. I think that's the approach that most people do with their annual conversations, and I'm not looking to change that. I don't know, does that make sense for everyone?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
question, are the employees then, and you mentioned comments, but are they going in and marking where they think they are level-wise too? Or is that
Yeah,
just
yeah.
for the supervisors?
I mean, ultimately, yeah, you can have an employee mark where they are, and then you can decide whether you agree. At which point you would just copy and paste the box and mark it in a different color. Yeah,
So 2 check marks potentially, or how instructive to see 2 completely different.
very instructive.
Yeah.
I mean, that says to me that you might need, some more targeted conversations with your employees if your perspectives are so wildly different. The other thing so some parts of the annual conversation forum continue to live. What people really liked was a place to list their major accomplishments, because some staff use their annual conversation forum as a reminder of the work they did in years past. And so we kept that from the annual conversation forum. And we also kept you cannot see it at all, this is goals. A place to continue the goal that we kept from the annual conversation forum. There was a place for employees to list their goals for the next year, and that's this section here. Overall supervisor comments. One of the recommendations from the strategic project teams, and I want to say it was, maybe there were 2, I think it was the innovation team and the staffing model analysis, was quarterly conversations between staff and supervisors. So in the spirit of continuous improvement, I think we start with an annual conversation, and let's get that right. And then for the people who are already doing quarterly conversations, we continue with those quarterly conversations. And then as we move forward and people get more comfortable, we think about adopting a quarterly conversation requirement. There's a place on the forum to document if you are one of those managers that are doing quarterly conversations here. So we've incorporated that.
So what I do with my staff is I do an annual conversation, and then on the quarterly I do a touch base meeting where I just kind of talk to them about how things are going and take a few minutes, but I'm documenting.
So for that, what I would do is I'd pull this form out and go over like the goals and the accomplishments and maybe here to see if anything's changed. And then you can just make a photocopy and write on it. That's how I would do it. Or if something's changed here. So if an employee has taken training and you've really noticed a difference, maybe mid-year, you move the dial on this.
And just to clarify, you said that this form is already available on the internet?
Yeah, I'm going to show you. Okay, so new form goes into practice July 1st. If you want to use it and it's okay with your employee, you can use it ahead of time. Or if you as an employee want to take a look at it and start using it and self-evaluating yourself, go ahead. But the HR expectation is that if you've already scheduled your annual conversations, go ahead and continue to have those. And that we won't start looking for the form until July 1. And the reason is that we want to give everyone an opportunity to get comfortable with it, self-evaluate, take some training if they need to before these things become a requirement. And we've talked about this. Minimum expectation is that you're doing this once a year.
So in the previous form, staff had the option of determining if the conversation was placed in a personnel file. Is that still an option for them?
I'm surprised that's an option. That's a requirement.
Well, there's a box that they can
Does
check.
it? Well, I learn something new every day. Annual conversations need to be in a personnel file. It's the record, the document of record for the organization.
Isn't it the staff, they can choose the staff-initiated ones included with the final version?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not
Or
the
they
one-
can, or they can just say the final version's okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it would be
Yeah, no, we
their way
need-
of documenting that, like, if they said something about themselves that significantly differed from the supervisor, they just want it in the record,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, for
Yeah,
the most part, the goal is to include anything that the employee wants in their personnel record, but no more than what's required. So what will not be in a personnel record is the supervisor's notes that are not in some meaningful context. So the supervisor writes an email about an employee, that doesn't get put in the personnel record. It's anything that's documented as official business. So the performance evaluation or an annual conversation should be in the personnel record, and including the employee response to it. Where to find more information, these are just links, because this will be on the website, the slide deck. But this is what it looks like right now. So if you go to the HR page on the intranet, you'll see a link to the Core Competency Framework, which were all the slides that I showed you before. And then here, so we've left up everything from the old supervisor conversation, along with the instructions, understanding that some people are still using that form. But here, there's a link for the performance evaluation forms, and that will bring you to this, which is every single position in KCLS has their own performance evaluation. So you can go in, find yours, you can find anyone's, and take a look at what that looks like. And it's all here and ready. Yeah,
Are they
Mary?
different for children, teen, and adult services librarian?
I
Or
don't
Just librarian?
think
It is
so.
different.
There's CMS librarian. I don't know that
I
it's
see,
competencies.
CMS librarian.
Yeah, I think it depends on if the competencies are different, because they're by department. So each of the departments did their own work. So CMS might have a slightly different set than the public services librarians, and I think that they do, because Bruce and his team did it differently than Jenny and Tess.
The only thing that I ask you to remember, do not work on those forms online, because those are Word documents. So if you are not saved them on your computer, they will be saved here. That means everyone else can see what you talked about with your employee
Thank you,
about.
Agnes. I would not have known that. So yes, from a staff confidentiality perspective, yeah, don't save on the SharePoint site.
Yeah.
Pull it down and put it on your own computer. Because then pull up and see Agnes's performance conversation. Yeah, and we'll make it a HR task to go in and spot check these just to make sure that people aren't doing it, because not everybody will do this training. So we'll look at I think there's a way to see when things were amended. We'll spot check that.
Will we continue to mail or inter-office in the completed forms, or is there an electronic submission option?
So right now, I mean, if you just email it to us, we'll download it and put it in the personnel file. So this is this is not what I intended this project to be from a delivery perspective. So when we got ADP actually does all this electronically. There's a perform function in ADP where all of this could have been done within the ADP system, including reports and being able from an HR perspective to see who's doing them and when, are they aligned to the anniversary day. We never turned that on, and I don't know that we will. But the goal, if we get a new payroll integrated HRS system, most of them do this all online. But with the issues that we had with ADP, we didn't want to add more, so we never turned it on. But that's actually one of the requirements as we think about a new payroll HRS system, is that we can integrate this electronically. That was the hope in 2016. But instead, we've done this. We're using SharePoint, which is itself a good tool to do this work.
I just have a question about the librarian work plans, and if those are going to be continued or integrated into the new policies, or
So that's probably a question for Tess. I don't think that I have not had a conversation with Tess around integrating them to this work. I know that Tess and Jenny took a look at the competencies, blessed them, and I'm going to assume that they had in mind that there were librarian work plans that were separate and different. But not to my knowledge.